How much of classic Hollywood films do you know? Well, some facts are common knowledge, but others, the producers tried to hide as best as they can but failed. From manipulating colors to terrible film mistakes, these random classic film facts are oddly intriguing. The curtains in Gone with the Wind. Remember Scarlett O'Hara's famous green curtains in Gone with the Wind? Well, turns out those curtains weren't even green. Back when they were filming Gone with the Wind, the Technicolor process didn't capture green very well. It looked strange or washed out on screen. So instead of green fabric, the costume designers went with gray. It sounds funny, but on film, that gray gave the illusion of a rich green color without any technical issues. It's one of those clever movie tricks that most people never even realize, but it totally shaped the look of that iconic scene. But when it comes to iconic scenes, you'd be shocked at what the great Alfred Hitchcock has to say about his favorite appearance. Alfred Hitchcock's favorite cameo. If you know anything about Hitchcock, aside from the fact that he was such a filmmaking genius, he was also famous for his cameos. In nearly all of his movies, he'd pop up for a few seconds, maybe walking a dog, reading a newspaper, or just blending into a crowd. But here's the twist. His favorite cameo moment wasn't even his own. Instead, Hitchcock claimed he admired Cary Grant's walk in North by Northwest, 1959, more than anything he'd done himself. He thought the way Grant moved in the film looked incredibly Hitchcockian. Somehow, Grant captured the mysterious, slightly unsettling vibe that Hitchcock loved to create. It's like Grant's stride became a cameo for Hitchcock's whole style, without the director even being on screen. It appears some movies are just so great, even the actors like to take a piece home, like this next actor, Bela Lugosi and his cape. Did you know that even off-screen, Bela couldn't seem to let go of Dracula? After his iconic role as the vampire, Lugosi became so attached to the character that he actually wore his Dracula cape just about everywhere. He'd show up at parties, events, and even in his own home draped in that same black cloak as if he were still in character. He was so tied to the role that he even requested to be buried in his cape when he passed away. Did you know in some other movies they manipulate a lot of things to give us certain legendary images, like this next one? The Wizard of Oz slippers. Dorothy's ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz weren't always meant to be red. In the original book by L. Frank Baum, her shoes were actually silver. But when MGM started working on the film, they realized they could use the new Technicolor technology to make the visuals pop. Red was more eye-catching on screen than silver, so they made a bold choice and changed Dorothy's shoes to ruby red. It was a simple color switch that created one of the most iconic props in movie history. As far as Hollywood history is concerned, on-screen romances were often real, all except these two. Vivien Leigh kissing Clark Gable. From the viewer's perspective, there was no denying the chemistry between the two on-screen lovebirds, but the reality is a bit more shocking. Even though Vivien Leigh might have looked smitten with Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind behind the scenes, she wasn't exactly thrilled about their kissing scenes. In fact, she reportedly complained about Gable's breath, saying it was pretty bad, and all because of his dentures. You see, Gable had dental issues and wore false teeth, which didn't exactly make those romantic moments easy for Leigh. Remember how they manipulate movies to produce curated content? Well, this next one takes the cake. Marilyn Monroe's iconic white dress. In The 7-Year Itch, the iconic white dress donned by Marilyn Monroe wasn't actually white. While it looks perfectly white on screen, the filmmakers had to work around the limitations of the lighting and cameras of the time. Pure white would have been too bright and would have overexposed, so they chose a slightly cream-colored fabric instead. This way, the dress wouldn't look too washed out under the intense studio lights, and it still gave that classic dazzling effect on screen. It's a small detail, but one that made a big difference in creating that unforgettable scene. Speaking of unforgettable scenes, this next actor seemed very forgetful on set. Marlon Brando couldn't memorize lines. In The Godfather, Marlon Brando famously used cue cards, which were hidden all over the set. In some scenes, his lines were even taped to the actors' foreheads so he could read them while looking at them. Brando believed that not memorizing his lines made his performance feel more spontaneous and natural. It's a funny trick that helped him bring the unforgettable character of Vito Corleone to life, without having to rely on his memory. What is your memory of the film, My Fair Lady? Probably the amazing singing, right? Well, this would burst your bubble. The singing in My Fair Lady. Audrey Hepburn may have looked and acted the part of Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, 1964, but when it came to the singing, that wasn't actually her voice. Most of the vocals were dubbed by Marni Nixon, a talented singer who did a lot of behind-the-scenes work for Hollywood stars. Hepburn worked hard and practiced the songs for months, but the studio ultimately decided Nixon's voice fit the role better. Hepburn was disappointed, but she put her heart into acting, and together they created a performance that's still beloved today. For some films, it's all fake performance, but this next scene took being realistic to the next level. The horse's head scene from Godfather. In this chilling scene, the character of Jack Woltz, a Hollywood producer, wakes up to find the severed head of his prized racehorse placed in his bed as a warning from the mafia. Now, most people may have concluded that the horse's head in that scene was fake, but believe it or not, it wasn't fake. It was real. The production used an actual horse's head, which they acquired from a dog food company. The crew made sure the head was fresh and lifelike, and it was so realistic that actor John Marley, who played the character receiving it in his bed, was genuinely horrified. The scene is shocking enough as it is, but knowing it was a real horse's head makes it even more unsettling. What's even more unsettling when fans learn about it is this next part. The piano in Casablanca. Remember that piano where Sam plays As Time Goes By? Well, it wasn't just an ordinary prop. It's become almost as iconic as the movie itself. But here's the thing. There wasn't just one piano used in the film. In fact, the famous piano that Sam plays in Rick's Cafe was sold multiple times over the years, often being touted as the only Casablanca piano. However, there were actually several pianos used during the filming, and the one that ended up being sold at auction wasn't even the original. It's a fun fact that adds a little mystery to the film's history. Just how many real pianos did the movie really have? Well, hopefully, no one stole any, which is more than can be said for the props in this next movie. Charlton Heston stealing the Ten Commandments. Known for his towering performances in films like The Ten Commandments, 1956, Charlton Heston apparently couldn't resist taking home a piece of the action. After filming, he actually took one of the Ten Commandments tablets as a souvenir. Heston, who played Moses in the epic film, reportedly loved the idea of keeping a relic from such an iconic movie, and the tablet became a bit of a personal memento. But sometimes personal mementos can become public property just like this. Red jacket in Rebel Without a Cause. James Dean's famous red jacket in Rebel Without a Cause, 1955, became almost as iconic as the actor himself. But here's the twist. After the film was done, the jacket didn't just sit in a costume department. It was reused in other teen movies of the 1950s and 60s. Studios loved the idea of reusing such a recognizable piece of clothing to save money, and the jacket showed up in various films, becoming a kind of recycled symbol of rebellious youth. It's one thing for an object to be recycled. This actor had his face transformed and recycled for our viewing pleasure. Frankenstein's makeup. Boris Karloff's monster, Frankenstein, 1931, is one of the most terrifying characters in film history, but what's even scarier is how the makeup was created. Karloff had to endure hours of makeup application to transform into the monster, but it wasn't just time-consuming. It was also incredibly uncomfortable. The famous flat-top head was made from layers of plaster and rubber, and Karloff had to be sewn into his costume every day. The heavy, tight makeup and costume often made him faint from exhaustion, and he couldn't even drink water during filming because the makeup was so delicate. Despite the grueling process, Karloff's dedication to the role made the character unforgettable. Now, actors are not the only ones with dedication. Some directors and producers hold their own and are super creative too. The shower scene in Psycho. In Psycho 1960, Alfred Hitchcock pulled off one of the most iconic scenes in horror history, the shower scene that took a bloody turn. But the blood you see in that scene isn't actually blood at all. Since the film was shot in black and white, Hitchcock used Hershey's chocolate syrup instead. The syrup was the perfect consistency to mimic blood, and its dark, rich color looked realistic on camera. It's a clever little trick that helped make the infamous shower scene so unsettling, and it's hard to watch it today without thinking about the sweet ingredient behind such a terrifying moment. For this next actress, the ingredient of her appeal was so obvious to all. Betta Grable's iconic legs. Her legs were her signature feature, and she knew just how valuable they were. In fact, she had them insured for a whopping $1 million, a move that was practically unheard of at the time. Grable was one of the most popular stars of the 1940s, and her legs were considered one of her most iconic attributes, often showcased in her pin-up photos and films. The insurance policy was a publicity stunt, but it also helped cement her as one of Hollywood's most marketable stars. Famous or not, some movies can just slip up in the worst way, like this one. Chariot race in Ben-Hur. It's so astonishing to see horrible film mistakes in an otherwise legendary film, and Ben-Hur is one of them. In the film, there's a famous chariot race that remains one of the most thrilling scenes in movie history. But what's interesting is that a stray Coca-Cola bottle can be spotted in the background during the race. This slip-up has been a fun piece of trivia for fans of the film. Despite the movie's epic scale and historical setting, a modern-day bottle made its way onto the set, probably unnoticed during filming. It's a quirky reminder that even in the most serious and grandiose films, mistakes can sometimes slip through the cracks. From slipping mistakes, this next one had actors slipping into unconsciousness. Flying monkey masks from Wizard of Oz. The iconic flying monkeys were not just a creepy part of the fantasy world of Wizard of Oz. They had a rather unsettling real-world detail. The masks the actors wore for their roles as the flying monkeys were so uncomfortable and hot that many of the actors would faint during the filming. Some of the performers even had to be helped off the set because they couldn't see through the masks and struggled to breathe. Despite the discomfort, those flying monkeys went on to become one of the most terrifying parts of the film, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the Wicked Witch's army. The fake shark in Jaws. The film's iconic shark, Bruce, wasn't exactly the smoothest operator. The mechanical shark frequently malfunctioned during filming, causing a lot of frustration for director Steven Spielberg and his crew. In fact, the shark broke down so often that Spielberg had to get creative. Instead of showing the shark constantly, he used suspense and sound to build tension, making the audience fear the shark before they even saw it. This decision ended up being one of the film's greatest strengths, and it helped Jaws become the thrilling classic we know today. Sometimes, a mistake in Hollywood can lead to something even better. King Kong's roar. The terrifying roar of King Kong in the 1933 film, King Kong wasn't created by a lion, as many people believe. Instead, the iconic sound was a mix of various animal noises. The filmmakers combined the roars of a lion, tiger, and elephant, then added a touch of a hawk's cry to make it sound even more menacing. The result was a unique and unforgettable roar that helped establish King Kong as one of cinema's most fearsome creatures. It's a clever example of how sound design, using different elements together, can create something larger than life. Stray cat in Godfather. The cat that Marlon Brando holds in the famous opening scene wasn't part of the script at all. It was just a stray that wandered onto the set during filming. Brando, being the improviser he was, decided to pick it up and include it in the scene. The cat's calm and unbothered demeanor added a surprising contrast to the tense, dramatic moment, giving Vito Corleone an unexpected air of control and serenity. It's a great example of how spontaneity can enhance a scene, turning an unplanned moment into an iconic one. Titanic set in A Night to Remember. In the 1958 film A Night to Remember, which depicts the tragic sinking of the Titanic, the filmmakers used a real-life ocean liner to create the look of the ill-fated ship. The ship in question wasn't the Titanic, of course, but the RMS Coronia, a vessel that closely resembled the Titanic in both appearance and scale. The filmmakers even used real footage of the Coronia for several scenes, making the ship's portrayal in the film feel remarkably authentic. While the Coronia wasn't the Titanic, it still provided a sense of realism that added to the gravity of the story. The decision to incorporate real ship footage helped to enhance the film's impact, showing the grandeur of ocean liners from that era. It's a great example of how filmmakers from earlier decades used practical solutions to create stunning visuals and immerse audiences in the story, even before the age of CGI and modern special effects. Hidden message in Rear Window. If you take a close look at the windows of the building across from James Stewart's apartment in Rear Window, 1954, you'll notice something cool. There's a sign that says Hitchcock was here. It's a little hidden Easter egg, and it's one of Alfred Hitchcock's playful ways of leaving his mark on the film. Known for his love of cameos and subtle details, Hitchcock included this sneaky signature in the set as a fun, personal touch, and it's just one of those little things that makes watching his movies even more enjoyable for those who spot it. Cat in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Holly Golightly's cat in the movie doesn't have a name, which is actually kind of fitting for her character. Audrey Hepburn's character simply calls it Cat throughout the film. It's one of those little things that says a lot about who Holly is. She's this free-spirited, unpredictable woman who doesn't want to be tied down by anything, and that includes giving the cat a proper name. In a way, the nameless cat becomes a symbol of her own loneliness. Holly is always surrounded by people but is emotionally distant, much like the cat. It's a subtle yet powerful touch that helps us understand Holly's character even more, and over the years the cat has become just as iconic as Hepburn's own portrayal of the character. It's funny how such a small detail can leave such a lasting impression. Betty White in The Proposal. If you remember her cameo from The Proposal, you may be shocked to learn it wasn't something that was planned from the start. Originally, the role she plays wasn't even meant for her. The part was intended for a different actress, but after the filmmakers saw Betty White in another film, they realized she'd be perfect for the role. They quickly made the change, and it turned out to be a fantastic decision. Her performance in The Proposal ended up being one of her most memorable comedic moments in modern Hollywood. She brought her signature humor and charm, turning what could have been just a small role into one of the standout moments of the movie. It's a great example of how sometimes the right person for a role is found unexpectedly, and in Betty's case, it gave audiences another reason to fall in love with her legendary comedic timing. The Vertigo Dress. The iconic green dress Kim Novak wears in Vertigo, 1958, wasn't just a random costume. It was actually custom-made just for her. Alfred Hitchcock, known for his meticulous attention to detail, was very specific about how he wanted the dress to look. He even insisted on a special shade of green, one that would perfectly match the film's eerie, mysterious tone. This dress is featured in one of the most pivotal scenes in the movie, when Novak's character, Judy, undergoes a dramatic transformation. The green color itself plays a symbolic role, reflecting the themes of obsession and the uncanny that run throughout the film. It's a perfect example of Hitchcock's genius in using every detail, from costumes to colors, to deepen the atmosphere and enhance the story. Fake snow in White Christmas. The snow in the famous White Christmas number wasn't real at all. Instead, it was made from a mixture of soap flakes and other materials designed to look like snow on screen. The filmmakers had to get creative since real snow wouldn't work for filming indoors, especially under the bright studio lights. However, the fake snow had a bit of a problem. It was so light that it often got stuck in the performers' costumes. Between takes, the actors would have to be brushed off to get rid of the snow that clung to them. It's a small behind-the-scenes detail, but it shows how making something look perfect on camera often comes with unexpected challenges. Dog paid actor in Wizard of Oz. Here's an interesting fact of the movie. The dog playing Toto was actually paid more than the Munchkin actors. Toto, the adorable terrier, earned $125 a week for his role, while the Munchkin actors were paid only $50 a week. It's one of those oddities in film history that highlights how animal stars were sometimes treated more lavishly than human actors. While it may seem surprising today, it was a reflection of how Hollywood viewed animals as major assets to a production. Plus, Toto's role was pretty significant in the film, so maybe it makes sense he earned a little extra. Skull Island set in King Kong. The lush, mysterious Skull Island in King Kong, 1933, might look like a real, exotic location, but in reality, it was just a set. The jungle scenes were filmed on a soundstage, complete with painted backdrops and carefully crafted sets designed to give the illusion of a vast, untamed island. It's one of the early examples of movie magic, showing how filmmakers were able to create expansive and immersive worlds without the need for actual locations. Even though the island wasn't real, the way it was brought to life helped make King Kong one of the most iconic films of its time. The Kid set. Charlie Chaplin's iconic set for the orphanage was built in just one day. Chaplin and his crew worked tirelessly around the clock to put everything together quickly. Despite the rush, the result was one of the most memorable and beloved locations in silent film history. The set became such a crucial part of the film, helping to create the emotional depth and sense of struggle that Chaplin's character, along with the little boy, experienced. It's a great example of how Chaplin's dedication and resourcefulness made a lasting impact on filmmaking, even when working under tight deadlines. Betty's incredible style in All About Eve. Some of Bette Davis's character Margot Channing's outfits were actually pieces from Davis's own personal wardrobe. Costume designer William Travilla was so taken with her unique and elegant style that he decided to incorporate her real clothes into the film. This gave Margot's character even more authenticity and depth, as the clothing felt more true to who she was as a person. It's a fascinating detail, showing how Davis's personal style helped shape the role and made Margot Channing one of the most iconic characters in classic Hollywood.